Good morning again. And so we are now recording and we're going to go ahead and get started. We have the attendance as well as the presentation in the chat. Please make sure you grab that if you need it. Please sign in again. It's in the chat. It's also on these slides. If you want a copy of the PowerPoint, that's also in the chat box. So Stacy's going to continue to populate that for us. So today we're going to be focusing on student voice. I loved this meme. I just thought it was hysterical to start with. So if you got opinions about the school, why don't you become a student voice rep? So I love again, you guys probably know me by now, the first five. I love seeing all of those, the memes that they put on there. And we thought we'd start with something kind of funny this morning. And that is this cute little guy saying he wants to show his student voice. I don't know if I want to hear it though, looking at that picture. Sounds kind of loud, looks kind of loud. But we are going to be talking about student voice today. We're going to have a nice presentation. We're going to have some resources. And again, as I said, some updates from the department as well. So here's our agenda. We're going to start with our presentation momentarily. We're going to give you some attendance and recognition updates. We are going to also give you a strategy or resources as we've been trying to do all year this year at our leader network, our PBS Leaders Network, to give you something that you can walk away with and implement tomorrow or use soon. And then we are also going to stay on this morning at 10 o'clock. Because of some requests that we have had regarding PBIS high school networking. So we will stay on for anybody that wants to stay on with us. After the fact, we're just going to provide a space for folks to talk if you have questions or you need to problem solve around something that you may be dealing with in your building. So that's our agenda for this morning. And again, we're starting with our state priorities. We want to make sure that we constantly come back to this because these are the priorities for the Department of Education and Workforce. And under priority 4 is everything that we will be doing today. Student wellness is what we are here for. So I am going to throw it to Frank to get us started with our student voice presentation and introduce our guest this morning. Good morning, Frank.
Hey, good morning, everyone. So very, very happy to be here and very lucky to kind of share a little bit about a team that is doing some great work. I believe everybody is very familiar with the TFI, and that first question that comes with the TFI, it talks about how do you incorporate family, how do you incorporate students. And a couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to sit in a PBIS team meeting with Bullock Middle School, and they did an excellent job of incorporating those things. And so today we've asked them to be here today, kind of share with them their method and their way of really incorporating student voice and also parent voice into their PBIS team work and doing that in a very effective way and finding a way to utilize that work on a day-to-day basis. So our Bullock Middle School team, which is right here in Cuyahoga Falls, it looks like we have a couple team members here, and I'll let Ms. Tucker kind of share who's all here and their role on the PBIS team. So thank you for being here.
Good morning, and thanks for having us and allowing us to kind of present how we utilize our student voice. I'll go ahead and introduce us. My name is Letitia Tucker, and I am the assistant principal here at Bullock Middle School. This is my 3rd year at the school and the 3rd year kind of heading over our PBIS team here. I am also half here with us, and I'll let them kind of talk a little bit about themselves as well. This is Joe Faulkner. You can introduce yourself.
Hi, Joel Faulkner. I teach health for grades 6th, 7th, and 8th here at Bullock, and I'm also a part of the PBIS team here.
I'm Jamie Hammer, 7th grade social studies, 1st year PBIS member.
Yeah. So we do allow the opportunity for our students to voice what their needs or what they see within the building. And it gives us the opportunity to support them more and to provide more of a positive environment within our building. We can go to the next slide, yes. So with our student involvement, the students pretty much, they're part of our team meetings, our PBIS meetings. We give them the opportunity to be in the meeting the first 10 to 15 minutes. Here within there, they kind of help to give us ideas on how we want to use our PBIS, how we use develop our incentives for the students, what things that they see within the building. So when we have our meetings, the first 10 to 15 minutes, the students are just a part of that meeting. We send them out with some questions, which we'll talk about how we do that, but we send them out with questions and they answer them in our first 15 minutes. And sometimes it kind of feels like a grilling session where we're constantly just trying to get more feedback from them based off of the information that we have. And then after that 15 minutes, we do dismiss them back to class so that we can kind of work on the information that we got from them and continue with our PBIS meeting for the day. Next, we'll kind of talk about the strategies on how we develop that team or how we get those students.
Okay, so we send out an application, and how we get this information to the students is through our newsletter called the Paw Print. It's also advertised on the morning announcements. It is nice when the teachers also buy into this and present it to the student in a way to get them excited that they have a say in what goes on in their building or our building. So to get that excitement in the student body, I feel like is very important. So not just, saying, hey, go to the Paw Print, there's an application, telling them what PBIS is, talking to them like, if you guys want to say in how things are run here, you can be a part of this team. So that buy-in from the teachers, it really reflects in the application process, like with how many, applicants we get. So again, the Paw Print, our morning announcements, and it goes out to everyone. You don't have to be on honor roll, merit roll. You don't have to have certain discipline. It's everyone. We want a diverse group of students. So, it is nice to get that edgier student on the committee, because you can get an inside, scoop on what maybe not only that student, but maybe their group would need, what incentives. So you want to offer it to everyone. And then when the application, the due date comes about, we get the applications back. We as a team review it, looking at who would probably fit best for this certain role. And then we select our students. Yeah. All together, we all come together as a team and figure out who would fit, who's a good fit. The next slide, right?
Yeah, you can go to the next slide then. And then again, so our student representatives that we do include from all 8 grades. Like we said before, the first 15 minutes of our monthly meetings, we spend talking to them. And I just want to reiterate something Jamie said, is that we really enjoy having the diverse selection of students. For example, this school year we have one student who comes with a very detailed written report, and it's like, took it very seriously, asked classmates, interviewed them, which is amazing. And then we have, we have like an 8th grade student who kind of says, like what she enjoys personally, and then we have a couple of students in between. We kind of have to prod a little bit, but they actually, everybody gives us a good clue of kind of what it's like to be a middle schooler right now at Bullock Middle School. And it really influences, how we do some of our brainstorming throughout the meeting when we are trying to come up with, what's the new initiative going to be for this month or this season. So it does help us, as the slide says here, the students do source their feedback, and it helps us kind of steer in the right direction try to stay relevant to what's going on in the school building, both what the kids' needs are, but also like what gets them, how do they tick, what gets them motivated. And so we both those bullet points there, the positive rewards and incentives, we check in on like, hey, how can we do better with these? What do you guys want to have coming from the PBIS committee? But also they kind of uncover what's going on in the bathroom, in the hallways, and what makes them feel more safe. An example from our latest meeting, the kids said, we feel safe when the teachers are in the hallways, right? And I think we know that, but it's a good reminder, like, hey, let's get out in the hallways when we can. And then, so again, the student input does help identify where we could improve and things maybe that we're not seeing, but they are. So it's nice to have them in there for that guidance. Yeah, that's about all I'm going to say about that.
And with our next slide, we kind of talk about, here are some examples of questions that we ask our students. So normally about 2 weeks prior to our meeting date, I will email our students that are on our PBIS team a question so that they can go and get more feedback from their classmates, from their peers to bring back to our group. And that just kind of keeps them reminded. So we don't want to give it to them too far ahead and then they forget. So I try to gear it to like 2 weeks just to give them some time to talk with their peers, come up with ideas on their own. And like you said, we do have one that brings a full typed up report on what's the information that she's gotten. So it gives them the time to be more prepared when they come to the meeting. And these are just some sample questions that we've asked them. Recently, one of them was, how can our teachers correct behaviors in a way that kids can respond to? So doing some research from our data on our discipline, we're seeing that, some of the discipline that our high numbers are coming from classrooms and classroom disruptions. So we wanted to get an idea from the students, what are some things that teachers are doing that's correcting them that we can maybe utilize and make it more uniform within our building. And we also ask, different questions on, like you said, what makes you feel safe, so that we can get an idea. Yes, we know as educators that being in a hallway is probably a good practice to make the building and the culture more of a safe environment, but to hear that from the students, or to hear things that we may not think about from their standpoint, is also helpful as well. And one of our biggest things, because we do for PBIS want to incentivize our students for behaviors, we ask them again, what things are they wanting to do? What activities do they want? Coming up at the end of the year, we do pretty much a PBIS push where we do rewards for honor roll students, for students with so many discipline write-ups, for students for attendance. So we do things like that. So we kind of have like a big PBIS day. So coming up in the next couple of weeks, they're going to start giving us feedback on what activities they want to do on that last couple of days of school, or what things they want to see in our big PBIS raffle that we do, just to kind of have a voice for them. And also, so we know that these are the things that our students are actually going to work towards in order to participate in that at the end of the year.
I'm kind of curious as to how students responded to the question, how can teachers correct behavior in a way that kids respond to? Did you get any interesting responses to that? I'm just kind of curious how they would have reacted to that question.
I know
No,
a
you're
couple
good. Yeah,
examples. So I remember trying to think back, but one example was like we got everything from, send them to the hallway, which we know is not good practice. But we also got things like some valuable feedback, if I remember correctly. Like they said, when what was it? Was it when the teacher offers like rewards rather than it's like kind of like to hear it come from a kid, that they weren't just like, oh, give them a detention or send them to the hallway, because we heard those. But they also, I think we heard one that said, I like it when they reward the kids who are doing the right thing. There's some other, we have to look at the examples. Do you recall any others? Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
No,
Just
it's fine.
those are the two
They-
I remember though, are
those
the
are the ones that-
rewards and then I remember going to the hallway because we were all kind of like, ah.
Yes, I do remember that. I think with that one, a lot of the feedback we got was that the students, because majority of our students are coming in, doing the right thing. I think, and that's kind of the committee we have. We've got those kids that are doing the right thing. And I think hearing their point of view, because a lot of our time gets sucked up with behavior, like we're putting our attention. So it's nice to hear that the students say, what about the kids that are doing the right thing? Can we honor them more than giving the teacher giving all their attention to the student that is maybe disrupting the class? So that, as a teacher, that kind of was, I had to stop, pause, like reflect on that and say, okay, how can I implement that in my classroom? To show the majority of the students, hey, I see you. I know I may not always get a chance to reward you or to acknowledge you or, spend that time because I've got, X student over here. But like hearing it from their point of view was really eye-opening. I mean, we know, but just to hear it out loud, I think that was probably, with Joel said, that's the biggest takeaway I got. Because I mean, sending a kid in the hallway, we know that doesn't work. Giving them attention, we do that. But I think maybe focusing on the majority and even if it's not like just a candy or that kind of reward, at least acknowledging, saying, hey, Susie, thank you for sitting down, like giving that, because then they all look around like, well, I was too. So then, rewarding that kind of behavior.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. And I could see that they would like to have attention spent on students doing the correct behavior. I could absolutely see that, especially in middle school, for sure. I think are we to that's okay, we're to the last slide there. So I'm going to open it up for other questions. I was just kind of curious as to how the students responded to that question, but we'll open it up to anybody here that can if you prefer to pop a question in the chat or come off mute. Any questions? And I'm sorry I cut you guys off if there was something else that you guys wanted to say. I know we're kind of at the last slide here. Is there anything else you guys wanted to add, or do folks have questions that are on the meeting? I love the fact that you guys reserve your first 15 minutes to have students in the meeting and then dismiss them, because that way you could still have them be participating in your meeting, but then you can dismiss them and deal with, stuff that maybe, there are issues coming up that they probably shouldn't be part of that conversation. But I love the fact that they're checking in with you at that first 15 minutes of your meeting. I think that's a fabulous idea. I think we could all take a lesson from that for sure.
Yeah,
I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Any questions for our team from BOLC?
I just wanted to touch too. I think that gives us a great opportunity, like you said, to give them a voice. And then when they leave, we can talk about confidential things, or if we're looking at data about other students or about the behaviors in the building, they don't see that information, but still, can be a part of the team.
And it's nice for the students to see a group of teachers like wanting to help and hearing their voice and knowing that we're doing something about concerns and we're listening to them. So that way they can go out and, tell their friends and let the student body know, even though they know about PBIS, but get that word of mouth, like, hey, I'm a part of this committee. There's a teachers that handle that, so I think it's nice for them to see that we are all a team and that we're trying to make the school a better place.
Mm-hmm. And knowing that you're gonna ask them to do something or ask for feedback, but then you're gonna follow through on whatever it was. I think sometimes we ask students for their feedback, and then maybe there's something happens and there's a lack of follow through, or we don't have time to follow through, or whatever that is. But just them knowing that you're asking for their opinion and you're going to act on it, I think I think this goes a huge way to really establish those relationships with students that we're always talking about how important that is, that we have relationships and we have, we have connections to students. And when they know you're going to, your word is kind of your bond, and you're going to do what you say you're going to do. I think that goes a long way, particularly, well, with any students, but middle school students in particular. I think it's really important to show them that trust.
I think one thing that I've found more so this year, but since we've started giving them that opportunity or having them a part of our team, is I more often get emails from students just in general that saying, hey, Mrs. Tucker, this is going on. What can you do to help? Or Mrs. Tucker, what do you think about this? So them actually knowing that we give them that voice, they'll email me from time to time with some information as well, or suggestions or questions, just because they have that confidence that we do listen to them and give them that opportunity.
And it builds a really nice culture in the building. It does. Like it's nice to, I mean, we feel heard and seen and know that something's going to be done about it. So it's building this like really, really strong bond in the building.
And Bullock's been on this journey for, I remember years ago, when you guys really started implementing PBIS, this has been a lot of years in the making. And, we always talk about how this doesn't happen overnight and how it's, it's a process that takes time. But you guys have really been working at it for a long time. So it's really glad to hear. I'm glad to hear that you're seeing benefits in your climate and your culture, and kids are feeling really open. I think that's awesome that they can just say, hey, Miss Tucker, we have this problem. Can you help us? I mean, that's for a middle school student, that can be very difficult. So I think that's great that those lines of communication are open. And again, the trust that you've built with the students there, I think that speaks volumes. Yeah, and there's some good feedback for you guys in the chat saying thanks for sharing, love the questions, and that it's really opening communication between adults and students, which is really, really important. Remember,
I
we
just want
teach
to remind
kids.
everybody that in that, I think the 2 slides back, there is a hyperlink to our
Yes.
form that we have the students there, the student representative form application. So if you want to borrow, obviously there's some identifiers in here that like the paw print and things that you might want to take out, but that's what the application looks like, which we review at the beginning of the school year in our PBIS team meeting, first meeting or two, when we determine who's going to be on the student ambassadors. So something for you to take home there.
Thank you. And I love the fact that you guys are saying that you have students on your team and you're getting perspectives from students that are not necessarily, that maybe you have students that have some challenging behaviors, and they're that that you're getting input from them. And that's really important, because we know that behavior is communication, and if those challenging behaviors are happening, it's really good to drill down to figure out why that is. So it's great to hear from the kids that always do what they're supposed to do, but I think sometimes it's more valuable to get the information from the students that are struggling with those behaviors, because they're telling you something, something's not right with them, or they're communicating something to you. So I love the fact that you've done that. We talk about doing that for staff on our teams too, that maybe we put on some people that might be opposed to some of the things that we're doing, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page and get their perspective. So Frank, is there anything? I don't see any other questions. And are there any other questions? I don't know, Frank, if there's anything else you'd like to add before we transition to our next part of our meeting this morning.
I just wanted to thank you guys again for taking your time to kind of share your journey with using student voice. Do a remarkable job. It's probably one of the hardest parts, within the schools, to include the student and family voice. And you've done a remarkable job of doing so. And so your students and your staff are better off because you've done that. And, thank you for being an example for others, and also being a great resource as well. So thank you for the team over at Bullock.
Yeah, thank you. And somebody did put in the chat that they're having trouble accessing the document. I'm not sure if I had no trouble clicking on it. I'm not sure if there's an issue with it or not. But Elizabeth, if you're having an issue, you can reach out to me too, or maybe the team from Bullock. I'm sure they would be happy to share.
Yeah, we'll double check the sharing parameters here in just a moment.
Thanks again, guys. I think it's part of the PBIS framework that sometimes we don't attend to as much as we should. That student voice piece is just, it's critical. I mean, they're the consumers of what we do, so we need to be checking in with our consumers to see what works for them. So thanks again for joining us this morning and taking time out of your busy middle school day to be here with us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for
Thank
having us.
you.
Thank you.
All right, guys, we're going to go ahead then, and we are going to pivot to some updates from the Department of Education and Workforce. The first being some data that was shared with us recently, was shared with me recently at a PBIS meeting, but also was shared with the directors and the state support teams. And that is the connection between PBIS implementation and the discipline they're seeing. Now, what you're seeing on the next couple slides are going to be data that's taken from the from the report cards, and then what is also recorded in EMIS. So that is then reflected on the report on your report cards. So if you're looking at this first slide, you'll notice that at the bottom of that graph are the implementation stages that you guys are asked to report on as far as what your implementation level is in each building. And for those of you that have been doing this work for a while, you know that each building then will put their implementation level report that, and that is put on the district's and the building's report card. But then the district then gets a rating also based on all of the yeses or nos that are reported in EMIS for each building. So some districts will be getting a yes because they have higher levels of implementation at their building. Some districts will still receive a no because they're not at those levels of implementation. But if you're looking at this graph, and again, this was the most recent data shared by the department, is that with the increasing implementation, what we're seeing is that the discipline rate is going down. So that's exactly why the state started this work, in addition to the restraint seclusion. But that's one of the main reasons why the state started this work, is because we want to see a decrease in discipline as far as we're implementing our PBS framework. So from what they're seeing and what's being reported in EMIS, they are seeing that trend. You do see a little bump up at initial implementation, and I think that's to be expected. Sometimes when we start an initiative, we don't really know exactly what we're doing until we're really getting into that initiative. So sometimes we do see a little bit of a bump there, but that's definitely a downward trend, and that's definitely what the department is really looking at to make sure that if we are implementing PBS with fidelity, that we are seeing those decreases. This next slide is talking about specifically expulsion rate and school suspensions by PBS implementation. Same type of graph. We're seeing the same decreases for expulsion as well as OSS. The higher the levels of implementation, the lower that we see those numbers go as far as exclusionary discipline. We've seen this actually in some of the work that Missouri has done, and they, when we work with our partner there, Dr. Tim Lewis, he's talked about as teams are going and schools are going up with the tiers, like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, they are seeing definite decreases in exclusionary discipline. And they're saying that when their teams are really doing this at a level of fidelity with all 3 tiers, that's really where they're seeing the bang for their buck as far as their PBS framework is concerned. And I would say these data that are coming out of Ohio are looking at the very same thing. We're seeing decreases as we should as implementation goes up. And if you're not as familiar with the categories on the report card, when you're really at full and innovation stage, you're really implementing the higher levels of the framework as well. It's not just tier 1. So we really know as we work our way up the tiers, those discipline levels go down. So that's something that we thought would be very important to share with our region. In addition to the discipline, the chronic absenteeism is also reflected the same way. Again, starting with not begun all the way to the innovation level of implementation, which is really all 3 tiers, and looking at your tools and sustaining and coming back to, making changes and making adaptations and all of that. But we are seeing the same in the state of Ohio, that same decrease again, that bump at exploration and installation to me is not surprising, because we do see that with a lot of initiatives. When we start, we see that sometimes there's a little bit of a bump there. But as things happen where the initial, full, and innovation stages are approached, we see that there is a definite decrease in the chronic absences for schools. So I think that's really good news. I think it's really reaffirming to see that the work that you guys are doing is actually making a difference, because PBIS is great, but if we're not seeing the outcomes, what's the point? So I think these are all very reaffirming to me, since most of the work I do is PBIS, so it feels pretty good to me that we're seeing some of these things. But I hope you guys feel also reaffirmed that you're doing the right thing, and hopefully you're seeing some of these same trends and patterns. So as I've said, as the more advanced PBIS implementation stages occur, we see that decrease in chronic absence and discipline incidences. So those are some things that we wanted to share with you, just to say we are seeing this at the state level. We really hope you're seeing it at the local level as well. But from what we're seeing and what's being shared with us from the department, these are the exact reductions that we should be looking for. And hopefully we're going to see more of that. So does anybody have a question on any of those slides before moving on to, which probably a lot of you guys are here for, some of the recognition? Okay, again, you can utilize the chat if you guys have a question as we go on, or please feel free to unmute. So as most of you are aware, recognition is changing for this year. The state support teams, the 16 state support teams, really are not involved in the processing or scoring of the applications. However, ESCs and SSTs are absolutely more than happy and more than available to help you as you get ready for recognition. The SSTs just will not be processing and will not be scoring any of the applications. So for those of you who are unaware, this is all going to be going through the department. And so we can help you guys get together your application and all these things, but you will not be submitting any of that stuff to the SST as you have done in the past. So we're going to kind of go through the timeline and some of the changes that we're seeing as far as recognition is concerned this year. And then again, please feel free to pop. I may not have an answer, since this is no longer going through the SSTs. I had a little bit more hand in it in previous years, and I would have a little bit more access to the information. But if I don't know, or we don't know answers to your questions, I will turn to the department and ask. But if you do have a question as we go along, feel free to pop in the chat or come off mute and ask. So here is the timeline. We are almost into March. Very shortly, we are expecting a resource document that's going to be on the department's webpage with instructions and the application questions, so you can prepare for that. This is going to be in the form of, that's going to be the form of a resource document. It's going to be like a little manual. When you actually apply, from April 1st to April 30th, there will be a survey available. They are currently saying they're going to use the platform SurveyMonkey for the application. And within the application, you will have the opportunity to enter scores and other things for the questionnaire part of it. But there's going to be a couple of portions of that survey. They're going to ask you to do a couple of uploads, one being a discipline policy. And then, of course, you have to upload your walkthrough form if you're doing bronze, and any other level for that matter, and any of the appendices that go along with the TFI. You will need to upload those within that SurveyMonkey. The third bullet talks about you'll complete and submit that link via that SurveyMonkey, and the department will review those. Again, SSTs will not be looking at those. And then, as I had already indicated, SST and ESC consultants can provide that support to your buildings and districts as they complete your application. So the timeline continued. They are going to have this remediation period. So once you have submitted between April 1st and April 30th your application, during the month of May, the department is going to review those applications. And if you have not submitted something that was supposed to be submitted, they are going to reach out to you and say, hey, you forgot to, for example, upload your discipline policy. Could you make sure that you do that? So they're going to work with you to make sure that all of your evidence is uploaded. And then if you have a complaint as far as restraint and seclusion is concerned, that you will have till May 1st to dispute that correction or put forth any sort of action that you need to. I will tell you, for the restraint and seclusion portion of that, I don't think anybody in our district has ever been, or in our region has ever had to go through that process. So I don't anticipate that's going to impact many buildings throughout the state. But if it does, if you have a complaint for restraint and seclusion, you are going to have to clear that up before your application is considered. From September 15th through October 1st, the department is going to review that data. And that's going to be your discipline data and your chronic absenteeism data. And we're going to talk about that in a second. You are not going to have to provide that. The department will pull that. And if you don't meet those thresholds, they will let you, they'll let you know via your application. By October 15th, the department will notify you of your application status. And then after that, they will let you know if your district then is eligible for district applications. Again, that's going to depend on how many buildings you have that have at least bronze status. And so they'll need to review all that. And right now, I don't exactly know what the district application will look like. I really just have had kind of a peek at the building application, but they will let you know if your district is eligible, and they will send you notification. And then you'll have time, it looks like, until November to go ahead, or through October, at least October 22nd. And then by November, they will then let you know if your district has gotten that award as well. So that's the timeline for the fall.
Heidi, I have a question.
Yep, go ahead, Kiza.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, everyone. So real quick, and maybe it's just unique to Mason, is there a way that we can find out what our level of absenteeism or discipline data that we're supposed to be meeting, so we know where to reach? And the reason why I'm asking is, in the past we would know our numbers, but since they closed Robinson and we inherited 100 plus of those students, how do we now calculate our absenteeism rate or our discipline rate, because our denominator is different? Is there anyone that can give me that number so I can tell our staff if we're on track, if we're not on track? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Frank, I'm going to kind of ask you if there's your thought on that, because we were kind of talking about this yesterday at the PBS network, the leaders chat for Akron. I'm going to throw it to you if you could maybe address that or help Kiza out there.
With the attendance piece, I mean, the attendance piece,
Go ahead.
the chronic absenteeism piece, we can always look back and see what your percentage was the previous year. And then we could calculate based on the students that are actually in your building this year with over 100 hours of instruction. So I'd be more than happy to help you out taking a look at that one. I know within your MTSS department, I'm not sure who leads, that work with you, but they can also get those numbers for you. As far as the calculation for the discipline piece, there's that particular formula for N size, correct, Heidi, with that? What's the calculation for incidents over?
I have that in my notes. It's incidents over, I think it's just over your ends, whatever your end size is. I do have it in I have it in my notes, and I can refer to that. I don't want to give the wrong information, but I do have that in the notes of the slides of how they calculate that.
So that should be proportional still to the number of students that you have enrolled. So if you need help, I'd be more than happy to take a trip out there and kind of work with you a little bit.
Okay, thanks, Frank. Thanks, Heidi.
Everything that Frank and Kiza were just kind of talking about is everything that's going to be that you've reported in EMIS. So those are going to be those year end. You can do some prediction, as Frank was saying, that there's ways to do some prediction and kind of see where you are right now. But what they're going to be looking at is they're going to be looking at end of year data for 24, 25 for both the chronic absenteeism as well as the discipline. So this is just an example of what your survey is going to look like. When you click on it, it's going to be a SurveyMonkey survey. And thank you, Frank, for chiming in there. I appreciate that. When you open it up, this is what it's going to look like. They're going to ask you to report your TFI scores, your SAS scores. They're going to, if you can see on the right side of the screen there, it's going to ask you about your discipline policy, which they do want a copy of. And there will be an opportunity within that file to upload that. And so this is kind of what it's going to look like. I will tell you the one change that's throwing me off and that I've already given some feedback to the department about is they're going to ask for your TFI scores by points. We typically in our region have always done things by percentages, and you can still do that, but you're going to need to know your points total as far as your TFI is concerned, because they are going to be looking at that. So when you're doing TFIs or when you're working us with TFIs, we're going to be looking at both the percentages and the total numbers. I believe I have given the feedback that I think that's going to be confusing, at least in our region, since we do everything by percentage, but just be aware of your TFI score by points as well. From what I've seen, I've had a little peek at what this next slide, or one of the slides is I'm going to show you about what the rubric looks like, and they're going to be asking for points. So a little bit more clarification regarding some of the discipline things that we've talked about already. So for bronze, silver, and gold status, they are going to be looking at that discipline data. And if you remember from last year, it's the same. That includes in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, in-school alternate discipline class, program or building, expulsion, emergency removal by district personnel, and removal by a hearing officer. They look at that data and that data, that'll be one of the things that's going to be on their rubric. And to get a yes, this year is going to be a little bit different in the past, because they were kind of like looking at increases and decreases at a level that's different than what they're looking at this year. A yes would be a decrease in discipline rate from the previous year to this year, which would be 23 to 24, then to 24 to 25. There's no change in your discipline rate would get you a yes on that. Or there's an increase rate below 5 absolute value points. That's different than what we've done in the past. So they're giving you a little chart there that says if the discipline rate in 2024 was 21.8, then in 2023, it was 19.7. It was a change of 2.1, but that's still a yes because it's below the 5 absolute value points. A no, you could see at the bottom, the point change there was above the 5. It was a 6.1. So that would be a no, that you would get a no. The rubric is going to be more yes, no, instead of a 0, 1, 2, as we've seen in the past. It's going to be a yes, kind of a yes or no. And I believe Frank's question, so all discipline rate is a percentage. It works out as the number of incidents divided by enrollment. So that's how they get that number. I'm not sure if that answers the question that Frank had posed to me, but that's how they calculate that. It's incidents divided by your enrollment. That's how they get that rate. As far as silver and gold is concerned, they're going to be looking again at your discipline rate that we just talked about, but they're also, this is something new this year, they're going to be looking at your chronic absenteeism. And so to get a yes, that your building would meet or exceed the state interim goal of 16.4%. That is the goal for this year. If your building is not at a 16.4%, there's a couple other ways you can meet it. One would be if you have 36.7% or higher chronic absenteeism rate, they want to see an improvement from last year to this year of at least 1.1 percentage points. If your absenteeism is lower than 36.7, but again, higher than the goal, they want to see a change 3%. So if you're looking at the bottom, that's an error. It should say building 1, building 2, building 3. It shouldn't say district because they're looking at this by building, but you'll see some possible ways to accomplish this. If you're seeing with this rate of 40% and there was a 1.5 change, that did meet the criteria, so that school would get a yes. The building 2, even though it did not move that much, they're still within the 16.4, they're under the 16.4 threshold. That would be a yes. And then that last building would be a decrease of 3.2 points. that meets that 3% minimum. And so that building would be a yes. So my understanding at this point in time, unless something changes, and again, since we are not involved, I'm giving you guys what I have as of today. But if there is a no on either the chronic absenteeism, if there's a no on anything on that rubric, the building will not be eligible for recognition. So if you're not going to meet it through the chronic absenteeism, if you're not going to meet it through the discipline or any of the other things that'll be on that rubric, a no, from my understanding, will kick your application out. This is just a quick screenshot of what the scoring rubric will look like. You'll notice right off the bat, it's yes, no, it's not a 0, 1, 2. And so you can kind of see at the left side, there's your bronze. They want you, you'll see that they're asking for that score, 21 out of 30. It's since TFI 3.0 is allowed for this round of application, you can use it. You don't have to use 2.1. I don't know of anybody who's doing that, but you can use 3.0 TFI. You're going to want to see those points. You'll see that you'll have to upload your walkthrough data, your self-assessment survey. You're going to need your numbers for that. You're going to have to upload your student discipline policy. And then at the bottom, you'll see that that student progress measure is down there for discipline. Silver is on the right-hand side there. Again, you'll see the same sorts of thing. You'll want to make sure you get your TFI scores in there. The practices match to student need. That's that Appendix B. You're going to want to upload that. And then the department will pull that chronic absenteeism indicator. So this right now, again, all in draft form, but we're trying to give you a preview so you guys can prepare for what's coming. Everything, all of the information will be on the department's webpage. And that is, if you go, the easiest way to find it is just go to the ODU's webpage and put in PBIS into the search bar and go to the section of PBIS that says recognition. If you go to that page, it's going to list all of the stuff for you. Nothing is live yet because that application doesn't open until April, but that's where you'll find all of your information as far as your application and what some of the requirements are. So before we move on, I'm just going to open it up to questions real quick. If anybody has a question as far as recognition is concerned for this year. It's quite a change. Stacy popped into the chat the page where you'll go to find that information as far as the application and what's required is concerned. No questions? Okay. Okay, so we started on such a positive note with our student voice presentation. We wanted to give you a couple of resources. We always like you to be able to leave with something. That was kind of our goal. That was something that came up in one of our internal meetings, and it was a suggestion made by Frank. And I thought it was a good one that we'd like to leave you guys with something to go as we conclude our meetings. But these are a couple of student voice resources that your team may want to utilize or look at. Number one, you guys have heard us talk about all the time, and that is the Cultural Responsive Field Guide. Not only will that guide give you information as far as cultural considerations, but also talks about student voice specifically and how to get student voice on your team. I love the questions that really talk about student voice, family voice, and all of that. And that's a direct link for you. There's also a really great article. It's kind of older now, but it's a really great article from PBIS apps called Including Student Voice in Your PBIS Implementation. That is really a great article with some solid suggestions of how you can include your students in your PBIS implementation. And then that last one, Castle has a student survey. There's a school climate survey and a feedback and input survey from PBIS apps that you can also use to help inform your PBIS processes. And those are all, the Castle comes from Castle, and you can get it from their website, but the second two are actually from PBIS apps. And if you're interested in using any of those surveys, or even just pulling maybe some questions from them, those links are there. If you want to give the survey, any of your folks at the SST have access to be able to set those surveys up for you. So that's something else to look at. I highly recommend and I know this is going to sound silly, but previewing the surveys before you give them, you're going to want to look at some of the questions. Some of the questions are sensitive in nature, and depending on your population and your community, you may want to look at those questions before giving the survey. I did work with a principal once that gave the survey without looking at the questions, and there were some questions about gender ideology that got him into some trouble. So make sure you're really looking at that before you give those to students. That's just a word of caution there. And the last thing that I thought was the coolest thing I heard this week that I wanted to share with you all. I was on the high school think tank last week, and they had they always talk about the high school processes, and there was a person who shared this strategy, and I thought it was fantastic. And that is, instead of having teachers give students acknowledgments or tickets or tokens or whatever you're using, or verbal praise, whatever you're using, flip the script and have the students give teachers those tickets or tokens or verbal praise or whatever it is, and have them acknowledge the behaviors on the matrix. And you can have an opportunity for the adults to earn something, or maybe it's just about giving the tickets and the feedback, but they call it a backwards PBIS day or a PBIS backwards day. I can't remember what they called it, but giving the students the opportunity to acknowledge the adults in the building. And they were doing this at a high school level at one of the high schools that was on the PBIS the think tank. So I thought it's not exactly student voice, but it's giving some power to students to be able to acknowledge the adults for doing the things that the students are expected to do. And I thought it was an absolute great idea. I've been talking to a lot of teams lately that have been struggling with a dip of implementation because the adults are kind of getting worn out. This might be a great way to reinvigorate your adults. And maybe especially at this time of year when things are getting tough, we're almost to March, it might be a way to bring some positivity back in the building. And that being said, since we are in March, please make sure you're doing your booster sessions, you're ramping up your acknowledgments, you're reteaching, you're doing all of that because everybody's tired, including the adults. And this is the time we want to really hit PBIS the hardest. And especially when we get to that last 2 weeks of school, we want to hit it hard there too. So this was just another idea that I thought was fantastic. And they said it worked great at their high school. So if anybody does this, I would love to hear about how it goes for you. So we're going to end with kind of a cool video. And it's going to kind of talk about how student voice is important. And then we'll move into our high school networking if anybody's staying on. So this is how we're going to end today.
Student voice, it's taken so many years to be implemented into education. We're in the education system for over 12 years. Why don't we have a say in it?
If we can't have an effect at our school, how are we supposed to have an effect in the world?
In a lot of my friends' experience, they feel like what they're being taught is not relevant to what they want to do in the future.
As consumers of the decisions that are being made by the administration, we should have a right to voice our own opinions.
Their education. And we make, as adults, decisions for kids without involving them in the decision-making process, or at least knowing what the options are.
They're the ones that are being taught to on a day-to-day basis. They're the ones that are learning from the process.
It's important to not lose that lens of being inclusive of student voice.
We have to completely redesign our education to make it more well-rounded and more beneficial for the students of the future.
Education should be personal. It shouldn't just be structural. It's important that everybody's voice is heard.
If students are involved in what they're learning and it's relevant to them, they'll be more interested.
And with engagement comes higher graduation rates, lower dropout rates, lower absenteeism rates.
We help shape our own path to what we want to become.
That is the importance of student voice, is being heard and being involved. I think it's a win-win for students and teachers.
We have students who have the potential to create something great. A school that is supportive of student voice is a school that puts in trust in the students. By building relationships with teachers and building relationships with others and really feeling that sense of community at your school, that is when you start to want to learn. You'll become more interested and intrigued to pursue education and pursue the paths that you want to take.
we'll kind of end on that note, as well as our upcoming PD events. We have the Combating Chronic Absenteeism Network coming up very shortly in March. We do have a restorative practices session coming up in April. And then our very last, I can't believe I'm saying this, last PBS Leaders Network of the year is going to be on the 29th of April. I think what we may do there, we're tossing around the idea of doing a preview of or a crosswalk of the TFI 3.0 versus the TFI 2.1. So that might be what we end up doing on the last meeting of the year.